On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas upends 17th ranked Iowa State 45-36. We recap what went right for KU.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. On today's edition of LOJ, we're recapping Kansas 45, Iowa State 36. Everything looked good for KU in this game, and we haven't always seen that this year for KU. This becomes their best win of the season, and 3-6 now on the year. I guess they keep their bowl game hopes alive. We're going to break down what went down in the game with KU's offense looking so explosive against one of the best defenses in the conference and in the country. Go to the game and what's next for KU. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So Kansas 45, Iowa State 36, the final score here. Just an awesome Friday, Saturday, I guess, 24 hours, 22 hours of a swing for KU athletics and for KU football, KU basketball between the KU North Carolina and the KU Iowa State results here. And it didn't start that way at all. Like, the opening of this game felt horrible for KU. You get the football, you go down. Your first play of the game, you get like a 15-yard run from Devin Neal. And we came into the game saying, run the dang ball, because Iowa State came in one of the bottom two running defenses in the conference, but the best passing defense in the conference. And so you run on the first play, you get 15 yards up the middle, and then you don't give Devin Neal another touch. And on 3rd down and 11, you run to Daniel Highshawn, get 7 yards, to which it's like, okay, if you're going to run on 3rd and 11, that's one thing, but you better be prepared to go for it on 4th down. Like, you must be doing this to set up a 4th down that you can go for it. And they get a 4th and 4 at like the plus 40, and they punt it. And they get it down at the 1, so it's good execution, but then Iowa State goes down quickly and gets a 99-yard touchdown drive, leads 7-0. And immediately at that point, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, shouldn't you be aggressive? You're sitting at 2-6. You're playing a top 20 ranked opponent right now. Why aren't you running the ball? Like, you have all these questions that we've had over the course of the season about game management, about play calling. And then KU was resilient. And that's been a common theme this year. Even though it hasn't always led to wins for KU, they continue to get up off the mat, right? They're like Rocky Balboa. And it's like Rocky Balboa in the first Rocky, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it 40 years later, he loses the fight, but he keeps getting up over and over again. And it's like KU's lost a lot of these fights, but they keep getting up over and over again. And eventually you're going to win a fight. And that's what happened with KU in this game, that they showed their resiliency. You get down 7-0, you overcome it. The offense was so incredibly explosive. You had 532 total yards of offense. You out-yarded them by 70. You had 237 yards on the ground. Like we said, run the dang ball. Well, you ran the dang ball. You had 46 carries for 237 yards, 5.2 yards per carry. So you accomplished that. The big surprise in this one was how well you did passing the football. 295 yards passing for KU. It came via big plays. And they weren't, it wasn't a super 50% completion rate. It wasn't like a ton of like consistent underneath completions. It was Jalon Daniels letting it rip downfield and KU finding exploitations in the Iowa State defense. And give credit to the KU offensive line, who did a great job keeping Jalon upright and blocking to allow you to throw the football downfield. And you found those openings in the secondary. And so when you combine 24.6 yards per completion with 237 yards rushing, you end up with an unbelievable offensive performance and 45 points. 14 rushing first downs, 10 receiving first downs against that defense is pretty incredible what KU was able to produce. And a tip of the cap for the KU offense. And Jalon Daniels, I think it's official to say he's back, right? Felt that way coming into the Kansas State game. Like, is he getting close to being back? Played pretty well, had the fumble at the end of the game, but overall played well. And then in this game, he was just dynamite. And I think it's pretty official to say Jalon Daniels is back. The rust is shaken off, and he is that dude once again, to where you go into each and every week feeling like you can have the best quarterback in the game. And that's how you feel right now with what he performed. I think on the defensive end of the ball, you do give up 36 points. You do give up 461 yards of offense. It wasn't the best performance in the world. Clearly at the end of the game, you're playing prevent defense and, just trying to run clock and stuff. And I'm not ever a fan of that. And so, that's not going to be great. But I will say you did a lot of stuff actually well on the defensive end of the field. I mean, after that opening drive where they get the touchdown, you pretty much just stonewalled them until the fourth quarter. I mean, they only had 13 more points until the fourth quarter after that first drive, and you only give up 78 yards rushing. The defensive line was really good in this game, both in terms of run defense and pressuring the quarterback with Rocco Becht. And so I thought the defense played better than the 36 points allowed, and part of that was scheme, the end of the game that I don't totally agree with, but also when the game was most on the line, your defense played really good for you. So what a win for KU. And yet, I hate to go here, but I think a lot of people feel the same way, so I'm going to go here anyway. It's impossible for me, and I think for a lot of other people, to in the back of your mind not be able to separate at least a little bit, seeing a performance like that where you win by 9 points against a ranked opponent, but a game that you were up at certain points by basically 21 or, 18 points or whatever, to where you felt like you were dominating that game at certain points in time. It's impossible not to, like, in the back of your mind, be just like, man, if they could have just won a few more of those, one-score games early in the season, right? If you just win 2 of the other one-score games you lost early in the season, flip whichever ones you want. Now, instead of sitting at 3-6, you're sitting at 5-4, where it's like, yeah, you're probably going to make a bowl game. And I guess maybe not probably, because you do have a tough schedule to finish, but like things would just feel a lot more likely to make a bowl game in that situation. And it just does become a little bit of, you get the taste of how good things can be for KU when they blow out Houston, a Houston team who beat Kansas State and who hung with Oklahoma and all this stuff. You beat Iowa State handily, a team that was coming in at 7-1 on the season. Like, it's hard not to get a taste of that and be like, man, how is this team not better than 3-6? And so they showed that stat in the game. I mean, they were the first 2-6 team since at least like 2000 to have that good of a point differential. It's just incredible. Like, I guess they are the best 3-6 team in the country. But what a win in the end. And removing that thought, enjoy the Saturday, enjoy the moment, enjoy the top 25 victory because it was a fun Saturday. It was a fun performance. And I guess if you want a big picture of this thing, like bottom line, even in a down year, you still found a way to win 3 games. You still found a way to win 2 conference games, which I know doesn't sound like much, but in your pre-Lance Leipold era, that was your high point year, right? Winning 3 games was your high point. And so if this is your down year, winning 3 games, with still a chance to win some more games down the stretch, especially if they play like that, they're going to win more games if they play like that down the stretch in another game, right? But in your down year, quote unquote, to win 3 games when that was your top year in pre-Leipold eras, and even in a down year to come away with a top 25 victory, to come away with a memory-fueled game, and to keep the support of the fan base, right, over the course of the season. Basketball season has started. People are super fired up about KU basketball. It'd be very easily to move on and for a lot of people not to even worry about what happens the rest of the way for KU football. I know there's only one more home game, but like, to win this one, maybe it is the difference of an extra couple thousand fans that come out to the game in Arrowhead for KU. And, everything counts when you're talking about revenue, when you're talking about NIL, when you're talking about recruiting. It all kind of adds up in one way or another. Let's get to our GOATs of the game. KU wins by 9, 45-36. Talk about the good and bad GOATs of the game next on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. As at FanDuel.com, if you did some pick a prop with us, we were on Devin Neal over rushing yards. That one came through for us. Devin Neal rushing touchdown. That one came through for us. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Continuing on with our GOATs of the game, this is Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget you can check out the postcast, the post-game recap of the KU North Carolina game as well, right here on Locked On Jayhawks. Check out Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball. So if you're new to the show, goats of the game, we give our good goats to kind of the new age, new wave of the word, greatest of all time. The bad goats goes to, a while ago, goat was a bad thing. You were kind of the scapegoat of the game. Let's start with the good goats here for KU, and we go with Jalon Daniels. He was, it wasn't his most accurate game, but I think part of that was intentional with the game plan. It seemed KU, and if you go back and watch the Iowa State Tech game from last week, Tech hit a few big plays against Iowa State. So Iowa State came into the game the number one defense against the pass in the Big 12. And when I say the number one defense against the pass in the Big 12, I'm referring to yards allowed per pass. They came up basically giving the same amount of yards per pass as they were yards per run. And they had only given up 7 passing touchdowns compared to 14 interceptions. They were also the number one passer efficiency defense in the Big 12 coming in. And so I think KU probably saw some stuff on tape, like, hey, maybe we can exploit them with some deep balls. And that was something that we talked about in the pregame that, like, I thought it was going to be in KU's best interest to just run the dang ball, which they did, and they did efficiently, and that was a big part of this. But for Jalon to be more of a game manager. And he was way more than that in this game. And I am so glad to be wrong because Jalon Daniels, 12 of 24 for 295 yards, 25 yards of completion, basically, 2 touchdowns, no picks. And he also ended up running the football really efficiently, really well in this game. They ran those options from time to time. I mean, this was by far the best that KU ran the football in a game against Iowa State in the Leipold era. Jalon Daniels ends up with 12 carries, 68 yards, and a touchdown. He was really good in just every facet of the game. And like I said, I'm ready to declare that Jalon Daniels is back. And now it starts to become a little bit of, can you convince him to come back another year at Kansas for next season, the way that this has kind of gone? Devin Neal gets a good goat for KU. Man, he just continues to grind away and produce each and every week for KU. It's not always wins. It's, sometimes wins. Sometimes it's losses. But, like, that dude is just doing everything in his power for KU to win or to stay on schedule. Ends up with 18 carries, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6.4 yards per carry, 2 more catches for 22 yards. And in all of it, he breaks the KU record for career rushing yards, career rushing touchdowns. It has been an unbelievable season and career for Devin Neal, even if the team success hasn't been there this year. You will still look back on his time at KU as having team success for making the back-to-back bowl games last couple of years. And again, hopefully they can, finish even stronger for this season. But he was great again for KU right from the word go against Iowa State. I think Daniel Highshaw, I'll give him a good goat here. It was nice to see him as the change of pace back, 12 carries, 56 yards, 4.7 for carry. Nice to see him coming back, coming off the bye week if you're KU. And by the way, that's becoming a nice trend here. Lance Leipold off bye weeks at KU. Things have gone pretty well for KU in those situations. Quentin Skinner gets a good goat. 4 catches, 135 yards, a touchdown. He continues to make these unbelievable catches. I don't know how in College Football 25, the video game, his like spectacular catch is not like 99 because he just like excels at those unbelievable catches. So Quentin Skinner was great in this game for KU. And it really was about the deep ball, the big play. And so from that standpoint, Quentin Skinner, typically if you're thinking of like, KU is going to have a passing plan or passing game plan where they're going to try to hit a bunch of deep plays, you think of immediately like Quentin Skinner being the recipient of that. And that is indeed how things kind of ended up being. As far as the offensive line, I mean, hope that Bryce Cable is okay and everything like that. The offensive line was really good for KU overall. So you look at this one and tackles for loss, Iowa State only had 2. That's a really low number for a specific game. Now, Iowa State's not typically a team, like they don't really pressure much. They only have like 3 down linemen on a typical rush play. So they're not typically getting a lot of sacks. They're typically sitting back, but you still need to do a good job of pass blocking. And KU did. 0 sacks for Iowa State in this game. And on top of it, you average 5.2 yards per carry. You keep your quarterback clean. Offensive line gets an A performance in this one for KU against a really good defense, even if that's not typically their forte necessarily. I think the defensive line for KU gets a good goat here. I thought, that first drive of the game was tough for really everybody on the KU defense, but then the KU defensive line really showed up. You ended up with 4 quarterback hurries. You ended up with 3 sacks, the total loss of 14 yards if you're KU. You also had 5 TFLs in the game, and there were I guess, plays from a little bit of everybody. You saw Blake Harold come up with half a TFL. He had 4 tackles. He had a quarterback hit. Caleb Taylor had that sack. I think that was in the fourth quarter of the game. Jeremy Robinson had the sack, and that was in the first or the second quarter of the game. Dean Miller had a sack. I think that one was in the second quarter. So you got production from a lot of different guys in a lot of different areas. And it was just a really impressive game for the KU defensive line. We thought that could be an advantage for the edge players, Miller and Robinson coming in. I thought that showed out for KU in how this one was. JB Brown also gets a good go, led KU with 10 tackles. Honestly, if I want to give it to KU's 2 starting linebackers in general, because Brown and Wheeler combined 19 tackles, 1 TFL. The reason I highlighted Brown even more was that 7 of his 10 tackles were solo, which is pretty incredible. Like Wheeler, in comparison, 1 of his 9 tackles were solo, and that doesn't take away from Cornell Wheeler. I think it just more boosts up how good JB Brown was, that he was just a heat-seeking missile. He had that big 4th down stop on the outside on Iowa State, so he was awesome for KU. I don't think it was the best game for KU's pass coverage. I do think, like I said, some of it was I didn't like the schematics of just sitting back, as we've kind of talked about before, and that you gave up some easy completions, especially when you got up big, that you were just kind of running the rest of it. We could give to Mello Dotson, though. He had the pick 6 for KU that certainly sealed the game for KU, and those are very important game-swinging plays. As far as the bad goats of the game here for KU, it's hard to have many bad goats in a game like this. I guess you could say, I don't know, like Damon Greaves averaged 33 yards per punt, but 2 of them were inside the 20. He was just trying to pin teams deep. So I wouldn't give him one, certainly, in this game. I guess you could say it wasn't KU's best pass coverage game, like we just talked about. Rocco Becht ends up with 383 yards, 3 touchdowns to the 1 interception. Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins combined for 15 catches for like 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. But again, I don't know that I would give that to a specific player. It might just be kind of a scheme thing, and with the score and time of the game in terms of how that went for KU. I do think I based on how the beginning of the game started, like the results of the game, great. But again, if we go back to the beginning of the game, if we're talking about process over results, that was not good process on that first drive, both in terms of the play calling and then the punting the football away. Like those are things that lose you close games. This ended up not being a 1-score game, but if it was a situation where you end up losing a close game, we'd be pointing back, right? Like if you would have lost this game, the same way that you lost the UNLV or the Kansas State game or lost by 3 points, we would have pointed to the first drive and said that was bad process or that was bad play calling or whatever it ended up being. And so from that standpoint, you still need to work on that. So I guess that would be kind of the bad goat in the game for KU. I guess you could say special teams in general. Iowa State did have like a long kick return here or there. You missed a field goal that gave them a little bit of juice, a little bit of momentum. So maybe that one would be the other one that I would point to for Kansas in this one. All right, what's next for KU? We discuss on the other side of Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by Game Time, which has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have all-in pricing where you can toggle that feature and shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. I know I love that because there's nothing worse than thinking you have a great deal on a ticket, then you go into the checkout and it's like double the price. Don't worry about that. Click the all-in pricing, then you know up front. Plus, with the seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you even buy, so you know what you're getting into. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, don't forget to check out our Locked On Jayhawks recap of the KU North Carolina game. We will be back later this week to have a KU Michigan State preview, so be ready for that one on Locked On Jayhawks. What is next? Well, maybe some people heading over to the KU soccer game. Hopefully the Jayhawks come through with that one over at Children's Mercy Park. KU volleyball, unfortunately, did fall in that game to Arizona, so 2 straight losses, tough trip for them on the road, but still been a great season. Still going to have a chance to host in the NCAA tournament, just looking to get back some momentum at the end of the season now. As far as for KU football, they're going to be on the road against another ranked Big 12 opponent. This will be their third of what is planning to be 4 straight. with BYU and then Colorado. But this time on the road at BYU. And this is going to be a really difficult one. BYU has been the best team in the Big 12 to this point in time. And you have to battle the time zone change. And it's going to be a late night game, so the time zone change becomes more apparent than if it were like a 2:30 game. It's like if it's a 1 hour difference and it's a 2:30 game, like who cares? But being like a 9 o'clock game, maybe that hour does matter. And it's an altitude game. And we saw KU go with a time change in altitude in Reno at Nevada last year, which was not a very good Nevada team. They won the game, but it was much closer than you'd expect. So if you don't play up to par, but you're playing a really good BYU team on the road, that's not going to go well. And most of all, that is the bottom line. It is a really good team. But a chance to play another ranked team, a chance to win another ranked game, and we'll see if KU can accomplish that one. And then the following week is your final home game, which will be senior day. And I really hope there's a good crowd for that one, because you can say what you want about how this season has gone, or that, you don't like the game management or this or that. I think Kansas has a lot of talented players. I think Kansas has a lot of players that have shown resiliency, that haven't quit on this season, that have provided so many great memories for KU fans, that I hope they get the senior day send-off that they deserve against a ranked Colorado team. So I think that should be a fun one for senior day in a couple weeks against the Buffaloes. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. We'll see you next time with LOJ with a little KU Hoops content. See you then.